Hello folks, and welcome to part 3 of making some medieval arrows. If you missed parts 1 and 2, they're up here on the cards and they're also in the description box below. And yeah, we're working on these medieval arrows here. So let's get on with it. And through the power of time travel, we've now got these varnished, as you can see. You can probably see the shininess of the horn nocks there, that shows it up more. The actual colouring of these poplar shafts when varnished doesn't change an awful lot. I suppose it does depend on the type of varnish that you use. But anyway, these are all varnished up and ready to go. So now I need to cut up the feathers. So this customer actually wants red and grey, so we've got our red feathers here from True Flight. And our grey ones as well. He wants 1 grey and 2 red, and as they say, these ones are fairly unusual, that he actually wants 8-inch feathers. So I've got a cutting block here, so I'll set the camera up so you can see what I'm doing, but I need to trim these to 8 inches. I'm actually going to do them slightly longer than 8 because I'm going to need to allow for paring the feather down. I'll explain all that in a minute. Let's set that up and we can cut these up. I've picked out 3 decent feathers there, as I was mentioning. That's one grey and 2 red that the customer wants here. These have got to be fairly decent, because obviously getting an 8-inch length is more than the sort of standard, usually sort of around 6.5 for doing sort of the medieval type arrows, and finding that sort of length out of the sort of what can sometimes be feathers with marks or chunks or bits missing is easier with a smaller fletch. But with doing something like 8-inch, you've really got to pick the best feathers out that you can. So I'm using my guide here. I've got a mark at the bottom there where the bottom of the fletch will actually go. The top end is going to be the 8-inch mark that I've got here, but as I say, I'm going to leave probably 1/8 of an inch or something like that for the paring down. As I say, I will explain that in a moment. So let's place this on the block, and just by eye I'm just going to go a little bit beyond the 8 inches there, give myself a bit of wiggle room. So there's our 8-inch fletch, and that's compared to the full length fletch there. As you can see, there's not an awful lot extra beyond what is not a normal sort of full length fletch, so you really have got to be careful if you're doing these larger fletches to pick out some that are gonna do the job. Cut these red ones up as well. These are a pre-ground, pre-cut and ground feather. Obviously you could make your own from natural feathers you found yourself, in which case you can probably do any sort of length or design, but anyway, there we are, those are all done. Right, now it's a case of gluing these onto the shaft, which I'm going to do, and there's only one way really to do that with such big feathers, and that's a big jig. Et voila! Here is the Big Jig. We have done a video on it, which I can put on the cards just up there, and I'll try and remember to put it in the description box below if you want more details on it. But to summarise, essentially it's a large version, hence the name, of a standard jig. This is the standard jig that most people are probably used to using in the archery world. This is a 6-inch jig, so the clamp is 6 inches long, but due to the nature of arrows and where the nock sits, even this won't actually fletch on a 6-inch fletch. You're probably looking at about 5 to 5.5 maximum. This particular one, the Big Jig, will do around 9-inch. In fact, if I get my measuring tape out, yeah, this will do about a 9-inch fletch, this particular one, which is obviously going to be fine for the 8-inch feathers that we are using. He says getting it the right way around. There we are. So that's the right way around. So those will go in nicely. Let's just slip that in. Yep, that fits in fine. So we need one of our shafts to go in here. Check it's the right way around. Just get the grain in the correct way. Put our little knock locator in the end, holds that in. Got an elastic band just to keep it in place, otherwise you need about 3 hands for this. There we go. Okay, so let's just check where this feather's going to sit, because obviously I want the fletch to be approximately at the bottom of the horn here. So let's just see whether that's going to be in the right place. I don't know whether you can see that on the camera there. That actually is sitting a bit too close to the horn, so I'm going to need to move that feather along. And obviously what I need to do, and again you may not be able to see on here, I've got pencil marks on here so I can get this feather in the same place each time, so I may need to try and use the other pencil line that's on here. I've got a few on here from where I've previously used this, so I'll try that one and see if that works. Yeah, that's about right. Let's see if I can show that to you on the camera here. Let me zoom in. Oh yeah, there we are. So we've got our horn there, and our feather's actually sitting just at the edge of that horn there. So that's about the right place for where we want that to go. And this is also what I was mentioning about paring down. So once that's glued on there, I'm going to need to remove a little bit of the feather, top and bottom, to expose the quill, which will actually be stuck to the shaft. So I'm going to be binding around that. So that's why I cut this feather slightly longer than the required 8 inches. So at least once we've done that paring down, we're left with a feather that still is the length that was required by the customer. Okay, the way we're going to stick these on is by using some fletching tape, simply because this is going to be a lot quicker than trying to use glue. Sorry, let's zoom that out for you. So we can put some of this on and we can get the feathers on, well, within seconds basically, and we can get on to binding them on. Find some scissors. Oh, there we are. Right, let's cut that to length. Okay, that's tapes on. Now the awkward bit, trying to blooming peel it off. First time. Oh yeah. Let's get that in. Make sure it's in the correct position. Sorry, I should probably show you the other end there. Got a little indicator there, so I can see that I've got this in the correct position. Stick that on. Firmly press it down, and then when we take that off, hopefully that's stuck. Yay, and it is. There we are, so we can just turn it round, next position, get on the next feathers. I shan't bore you with that, I'm sure you can imagine how that'll be, and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, all three are on. We've got our grey and our 2 reds. Now we're going to do that paring down that I was talking about. So that means removing these little areas here. So I'll try and do this on camera for you. See, so we've removed that tiny little bit there. So we've got slightly less feather. And then I need to just take down that quill a bit, just to make it a bit flatter and neater for our binding to sit on. There we go. So I'm going to do that to the rest of it, and yeah, by the magic of time travel, join me when I've finished doing all of them. Hello folks, and welcome to part 4 of making the medieval arrow.
Oi! What do you think you're doing?
I'm just introducing part 4.
What have I told you about time travelling? It's going to cause some terrible paradox where time starts running backwards, or everything's going to start coming out of our bums or something.
Sorry.
Don't do it again.
3, 2, 1, and you're back in the room. There we are, so that's those done. So that's the top there, as you can see, all pared down, and the bottom is the same. Now it's time to do some cutting. We've actually got to cut these feathers to shape, so let's do that now. Not that I'd recommend it, but if you do have a perfectly steady hand, a very good eye, an extremely sharp pair of scissors, you could just cut these as they are. But most of us aren't like that. Most of us are cack-handed and have got crappy scissors that are covered in whatever these are,
covered in. Anyway, so I would use some masking tape, this type here, the sort of stuff that you use in decorating. So this is actually the inch wide stuff, so we're going to lay that on there. The reason I'm using inch wide is because at the top end here, the knock end, I tend to start around about an inch, just under, so I'll actually be cutting just under the height of this, and then obviously going down to basically nothing at the bottom here. So I need to put tape around all three of these. I'm sure you guys at home have got other methods of doing this, and I'm sure some of you probably do just cut them as they are without putting any tape on. But putting the tape on, it gives you a guide. I don't draw on it anymore, but you can obviously draw a line on here, which you can't do on the feather itself. Well, I suppose you could use pen, but then you'd end up with pen marks all over it. So you could use a pencil now and actually draw, get a ruler, put this on the side of your bench so you're supporting the feather, and actually draw a line for you to follow, particularly if you've never done this before. The other thing that the tape does is actually keeps the fletch together rather than the quills all the spines of the feather actually sort of separating as you're trying to cut. You end up with a staggered or uneven cut. So that's the tape all done on there, and I'll try and rearrange the camera in a position so that you can actually see me cutting this. So I tend to hold it this way round, as I say, I'm starting at well, what is now technically the bottom because it's at the bottom, but it's actually the top because it's the knock end, and yeah, that's probably just getting overly complicated. So yeah, I'm going to cut here just below the height of the tape, and then by eye. So by the time I've got to the middle there, I should be down the middle of the height, if you see what I mean. So I'm not at quite at the top, and I'm not quite where the shaft is, so I'm about halfway when I'm halfway. Does that make sense? So I'll carry on cutting. So I'll carry on cutting at that same angle. So I'm basically doing a straight cut. I'm not trying to do anything fancy shape wise. So that's the shape that you end up with there. So let's do the others. Let's take that off there. There we go. That's what we end up with. Now for the annoying and boring bit, binding. Okay, I'm using some linen binding thread here, which is the ecru colour, which is a sort of natural brown. As I say, this is a linen. It's quite thick, so that actually it's going to provide some protection and also some longevity to these arrows, rather than using something like the silk, which can easily break. Now, doing the starting off here, I tend to make a little angle on the thread there, so that gives me something to latch onto the bottom of the quill here. This is the pared down section of the quill that we did. So I'm going to find the longest one here, so to give me some neatness, put that along the side. Oh, it's come off already. Look, you see, that's how difficult it is, even when you've done 15 million of these blooming things. Gonna go round. There we go. Actually, I'm going to start that again. I didn't like that. There was a bit of fraying on the string. So start that again. There we go. Right. So I've caught that round on that little bit that I put up the side there. Can you see that? So that's actually got some tightness in it now, and I'm pulling relatively tight, so I spin with one hand and hold the string with the other, so I can actually wrap that around. So that's that pared down bit of the feather covered now. So that end is nicely secured, and obviously the other end will be doing the same. So we've got both ends tightly bound on, and now comes the bit where we're actually going up the fletch. Because of the style that I'm doing these videos, they're quite quick to keep everybody hopefully entertained during the whole having to stay at home thing. Can't say the word. This might not be the most elegant way of filming it. I have done other videos on binding which I hope I've spent much more time in production wise, angle wise, and showing how I do it. So I'll put some of those up on the cards and in the description box below. So if you want to see some more detailed on how to do binding, then please do follow those. This is probably going to be a little bit quick and dirty, I believe they call these videos, which my mum thought was a very funny name for them. Hello, Mum. So yeah, there we go. So let's get this bound on. If you see me going back as I'm doing now, it's because sometimes, again this is probably very hard to show on the video, the feather, parts of the feather actually do get sort of squashed as you're putting the string on, which doesn't look very neat. I mean, I suppose it's debatable, perhaps that's a better word, debatable as to how neat, in the true sense of these arrows being used in battle. Did they need to be that neat? Probably not. They just need to be kept on. I mean, the reason that we do the binding of these sorts of things is so that they actually stay on, because people didn't really have waterproof glues. So I mean, you tell me. What do you think, guys? Did they need to be that neat? I mean, the reason that we make arrows so neat as far as the binding goes is because of the examples that we have, which are, well, Tudor, which are really from things like the Mary Rose, which did have immaculately made, incredibly neatly bound, silk bound on fletchings. So that's sort of really where contemporary copies, if you like, are being based on, are those sorts of arrows. So I don't know in battle, would it have mattered if they were all equally and evenly spaced bindings? In my opinion, probably not. But yeah, it's a nice thing to do. They look aesthetically pleasing. Would people of any time period taken their work in any lesser serious way? Would they, they would have taken pride in what they were doing, just in the same way that I'm doing. I'm trying to do that as neatly and evenly as I can. So maybe it's just simply because that's how people made them. Yeah, I think that's one of those interesting topics of conversation. So right, yeah, give me a few minutes, check back with me, and hopefully we'll have finished this off. Okay, we've reached the top, so I'm just going over that extra bit that I pared down. Hopefully this is coming out okay on the video. So I'm going to take a length now because I need to do some finishing off. Snip that off. Now the finishing off process again, I've shown this more accurately and close up in other videos, but essentially we're taking one bit in one hand and we're wrapping the excess around, poking it through, do, I don't know, 3 or 4 turns, however many you want really. Poke that through, drag that end down, that one across, change hands, and then spinny, spinny, spinny. on there and hopefully just pull that through, and that loop should tighten round. And we've then tightened that end there, and all we need to do is snip off the excess like so, and that is our arrow done. Okay, well, yeah, as you can imagine, that's going to take me quite a while. There's 20 of these that I've got to do. So yeah, join me next time in the next video, which will be part 3, I think, where... hi, no, he actually means part 4. I'm here from the future, where it's part 5, and everything's gone back to normal. So yeah, ignore him. He's not talking about part 3, because it already is part 3 that he's in. And it's actually part 4 that's coming up, not part 5. Part 5 will come after part 4, which is the part that I'm in now. We will be, I'll show the rest of these finished, all 20 of them hopefully, and we'll stick some ends on the other end, which is also something we have to do, otherwise these won't really be arrows. So yeah, if you'd like to subscribe, that's a thing over there, and if you'd like to watch some other videos, that's a thing over there. And I say, join me next time when no doubt my hands will be like a bare knuckle boxer from the 20s, and my shoulders and back will be as stiff as fudge.